Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular joining us from the Big Easy.
Hello.
Creole down there. Russell Dobular poolside at his hotel. He is on a work/pleasure trip down in New Orleans, but we thought we should do a live stream anyway, and we brought our pal Durga, who goes by Adventures in the Free World on Medium. She is also a contributor to our blog. For those of you who are new to the show, we have a blog and a website, dudissidents.com. We also have a Substack, dudissidents.substack.com. Durga's written a few great pieces for us there, and it's always great to talk to you. So thank you for making the time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to do a segment on AOC's GQ photo shoot because that's somewhat of a high-profile topic right now. And it just so happens that this segment sort of coincides with, Durga, you were sort of pitching us an article about how the term progressive has sort of lost a lot of its meaning precisely because a lot of progressives, both progressive politicians and just rank and file progressive voters, progressive activists, right? Just progressive people more broadly, seem very comfortable, if not eager, to mingle with elites and participate in a sort of inside the system strategy. And so I thought this was a perfect sort of coincidence that this AOC GQ photo shoot dropped at the same time that you were pitching us this article. We're just going to put up on the screen here. AOC posing for GQ. Notice in the center picture here, she's wearing the Ukraine colors, the royal blue and the bright yellow shoes there, which I thought that was especially outrageous. And so, yeah, I thought this was just a great setup.
It's not just a proxy war. It's a fashion statement.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So yeah, I thought those two things lined up very perfectly for us to just kind of come on and have a midweek live stream. So go ahead, take it away. This sort of fits your thesis pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I've noticed starting almost immediately with the last Democratic primary, when Bernie Sanders announced that he was dropping out, is when the really big split between progressives and leftists became apparent to me. I mean, I think it was probably there in 2016, but I was paying less attention. My mind was already made up. I'm not voting in the general election for the two major parties. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And I was kind of like less online and less engaged at the time. But in 2020, I was in all these different Bernie Sanders groups and volunteer organizations. And then all of the ire that had been projected onto all of us as Sanders supporters by Blue Dog Democrats and liberals, all of a sudden, the half of the progressives, maybe even more, that we thought we were all on the same team together with, were projecting that same ire on everybody that was saying, screw this, I'm not voting for Joe Biden, sorry. So they started calling us all the same names that we had all been called together, getting all the same accusations about purity tests and, refusing to cooperate, and we would be responsible for reelecting Trump. And like, these were the people that like just weeks before we were all phone banking together and canvassing and saying we're part of this revolution, right? And I started going, there has never been a revolution. But what I couldn't understand is how quickly people were willing to give up everything that they said that they stood for 5 seconds ago and said that they were fighting for, and start making excuses about it, right? And then I thought that as the Biden administration took shape and the combination of the various, ineptitudes of the squad and the other House Progressive Caucus leading up to 2020, and then on top of that, all of the other things that just continued to show the mask slipping on all of these people we elected with this mandate that they were going to pull the party left and they were going to hold Biden's feet to the fire and, and get us Medicare for all and the Green New Deal and all of these other things. it really started to become clear, I think, around the time that force the vote became a thing. And that created so much acrimony and so many kind of internecine wars between progressives and leftists that, it looked to me like these people that are calling themselves progressives but are just continually carrying water for the Democrats are part of a completely different class. Because people whose lives literally depended on Medicare for all aren't the ones that sold out on Medicare for all and said, never mind, we can wait until 4 or 8 or 12 years from now when we just get enough progressives elected to finally get a healthcare system. People who have been living at the effect of climate chaos and, based on demographics and income, we're not saying, never mind, we'll just wait, right? The people that could afford to wait are the professional managerial class, liberals that like to see themselves as holding these progressive values. But then when it comes down to actually standing behind them and doing what it takes to make those things happen, I don't know if it is ignorance, if it's delusion, if they're just lying to themselves, if they're just pretending to be for all these things. I don't exactly know what the motivation is and how they justify it to themselves. But it's really, really clear, I think, at this point, that you cannot attain leftward progress by collaborating with the bourgeoisie. And the liberal class and the Democratic Party's interests are fundamentally antagonistic to a worker-centered government and antagonistic to ending imperialism. And that's another thing I've noticed is I don't see anybody in the progressive faction having a problem with imperialism. I've seen them all jumping on board with the Ukraine narrative readily.
She's in the get up there. She's got the blue and the yellow. She's rocking it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to...
I mean, those could just be her colors, though.
It could just be her colors. And then just look, I mean, I know you guys have several examples, and I asked you for them when we were messaging because I can't remember them all off the top of my head. But I really want to drive this home and make this concrete for people who are still thinking that this is some sort of petty ideological battle where it's like these people just have a different idea of execution. And it's not. We all have concrete examples that we could cite that are saying, look, it can't be more obvious that nothing is going to happen inside the Democratic Party, period, for leftists, because the Democratic Party itself is an engine of upholding capitalism and empire. Chris Hedges wrote a whole book on that in 2009 called Death of the Liberal Class, which I recommend that everybody read. And so, I don't know what it takes to get the message across, but it is actively perpetuating the harm. And the people that think that they're reducing the harm are perpetuating the harm, and then still claiming harm reduction. And before I approached you about this too, I also saw the circulation about, oh my God, Biden is going to forgive $10,000 worth of student loans. So I'll just wrap up by saying this, because I know I've been kind of on my soapbox a little bit, but I'm borrowing this.
No, not at all. That's why we brought you here.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We need some rest from the soapbox.
Okay. Well, I'm borrowing this from the Jimmy Dore segment just for the viewers so that you can see what it is. He put out a discussion called Debate. Are Democrats really any better than Republicans? And there's a whole discussion. But in the comments, there was a guy named Thaddeus Mason that couldn't have put it any more perfectly. He said the crumbs the Democrats give are worse than getting nothing because millions of people like Ben, who's featured in the debate, this guy Ben, come out to defend
Ben Glebe. I've heard of him before.
Yeah, Ben Glebe.
I forget where, but I have heard of him before.
Yeah, millions of people like progressives come out to defend those crumbs, and then the establishment points to that support to avoid doing anything further for as long as possible. Getting nothing would at least piss everyone off and potentially galvanize a movement. Getting crumbs leads to people like Ben Glebe and other progressives complacently being fine with things incrementally changing because it's better than nothing. And at this point, I don't know what it takes to strip people of the delusion that we can afford to wait any longer.
Well,
I don't know what it takes.
what always strikes me about these people is they don't even care about what they claim to care about. Look at how they treated Tara Reid. Look how they treated this woman. They've been running around, Me Tooing everybody in sight for years. And they did everything you're not supposed to do in those situations. They questioned her integrity. They tarred her. They dug into her past. They dismissed her. They tarnished her. All these things that they say that's evil. They've been saying this for years, right? And you can see again and again, it just depends on who it is. That's all. It just depends on who it is. If you're somebody who is a member of the club in good standing, they will cover for you. If you're not, if you're somebody disposable or somebody they want to get rid of, all of a sudden they have a lot of morals and a lot of ethics about victims and how you're supposed to treat victims, but not in Joe Biden's case eventually.
Yeah. Moral relativism in the extreme. I've never seen
this happens again and again. I mean, Obama was the exception. Let's do a little classic here.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
They're still letting that scumbag. He spoke at the DNC. AOC didn't. She didn't speak at the DNC. Clinton did.
Well, this article makes mention of the fact that, AOC, after being a good soldier and endorsing Biden and getting on board with the ticket after the 2020 primary resolved, she still got less airtime at the DNC in 2020 than Republicans got. I mean, they gave more airtime to the never Trump conservatives than they gave to her. And, it's funny because this wasn't just a photo shoot. This was a very, very long profile that GQ wrote on AOC, complete with several sort of interviews. And the thing is, her interview for this magazine, I didn't even think was that bad. And you can see her sort of devolution into a Washington swamp creature sort of underway here. It's still something that she herself really seems to struggle with. I'll put this up on the screen here. This is just a quote from her. She says, "Others may see a person who is admired, but my everyday lived experience here is as a person who is despised. Imagine working a job and your bosses don't like you and folks on your team are suspicious of you, and then the competing company is trying to kill you." And
sorry, this whole thing, competing company is trying to kill you, is just, that takes the cake.
Well, I mean, look, she gets a lot of hate mail, and I'm sure she gets a ton of hate mail. I'm sure she gets some pretty vile threats. And look, as a public figure, unfortunately, that's par for the course. Nobody would condone it, but every public figure gets hate mail if you're a celebrity like that. But look, she is prone to a lot of vicious attacks from the right. Some of them, I'm sure, are threatening. But to me, the point here is that she feels unwelcome. She feels uncomfortable, and she has spoken about in the past how this has been somewhat of a disheartening experience going to Washington. She has said in the past that she feels like perhaps she could do more as an outside organizer. She said that again in this interview. The problem, and this is where I think, Durga, you make a good point, is that by mingling with these sort of elite institutions, by going to the Met Gala, even if it is to wear your tax-to-rich dress, right, you are losing that grassroots support that would have your back in that sort of struggle that you see is a two-pronged fight against Republicans and corporate Democrats. When you acquiesce too much to the system, you lose that army in back of you, that army behind you that sent you there, which Russell was a part of. Russell went door to door knocking on doors for AOC in 2018. They start to retreat. She could take a big lesson from Kshama Sawant in Seattle. She actually uses her office as an activist would, and she's a total ball buster, right? She opened up City Hall. They went in there and they had a sort of Black Lives Matter vigil / protest / rally when they weren't supposed to be in there. But she said, you know what? This is City Hall. This is the people's house. I'm letting them in. Oh, I'm not supposed to do that? Well, what are you going to do? Recall me? Good luck. We'll see you at the polls. And she beat them back. And I forget who she told this to. There was a great interview that she gave where she said, you know, I get this criticism a lot from people who say, well, why won't you just be a little easier to work with, right? If you're a little easier to work with, then maybe you wouldn't be facing a recall, right? Maybe you wouldn't have all these constant hurdles thrown at you. And it would just be easier to, broker deals, legislate, right? Whatever. And she says, well, the thing is, I'm not a Democrat. I'm a socialist alternative party. So does anybody think that if I were to play nicer with these people, that they wouldn't come after me? No, they're going to come after me anyway because I'm not one of them. The difference is, if I played nicer with these people, the only thing that would do is make me more vulnerable when they do come after me. Because if I play nice with them, then my volunteer army of badass activists that have my back now wouldn't have my back anymore. And when they came at me, they would beat me. That's what would happen. You know, we interviewed Kshama's campaign manager in the run-up to that recall. I was lucky enough to be able to co-host a sort of online fundraiser for her with a few other great people. And I interviewed Kshama herself and 4 activists involved in the anti-recall movement and watched all these people be interviewed. We probably, as a team, I hosted it with 4 other people, we interviewed probably 30 people that night. And they were super impressive. I mean, these people were obviously real deal, die-in-the-wool leftists. I mean, Kshama is hardcore. I mean, she is a true leftist. These people were...
She wants to go full Dr. Zhivago. She wants to take away the houses from the rich people and redistribute.
Right, yeah, exactly. Convert private mansions to public housing. Right, she's hardcore. So she had this hardcore team in back of her. And not only were they hardcore, they were smart, they were sharp, they were super competent, super on point, super together. And they won. And they won because they had her back, because they knew she was going to use that office to rep them as hard as she possibly could every single day. And she wasn't going to ever get invited to the Met Gala. GQ was never going to call her for a photo shoot, right? And so they knew that she was there to rep them, and so they had her back. And I feel like AOC kind of feels like she's in a strange place right now because she feels like no one in Washington really has her back. But she ought to remember that, hey, the people you meet on the way up, you meet again on the way down, right? So rather than do this photo shoot and this interview with GQ, if you had showed up at the Labor Day rally in Times Square, which happened this Monday with the Amazon Labor Union, Starbucks workers were there. If you had showed up there and you had consistently showed up at events like that and really fought hard, then I don't think you'd be feeling this sort of precariousness and this sort of malaise right now, because you know, hey, look, if I lose my seat, if they come at me and they beat me, worst thing, I lose my seat, I now lead this activist movement because I still have this army of people behind me who love me and are there for me and are going to back me. And I feel like she doesn't really have that anymore because she's played this game too much. And I think that's why she finds herself in this place where she's always telling these people who interview her, yeah, you know, maybe I should quit and go be an activist because I don't know, it just seems like nothing's going to happen here. Everybody hates me here. The problem is when you acquiesce to them, the more you acquiesce to them, the less and less your grassroots base loves you anymore. And so it puts you in this very strange place. And I think that's where she is.
I
think you're being generous, honestly, Keaton, when you, I think you're being generous to think that she really feels that way just because she's saying she feels that way. What I see with AOC and the rest of the squad and Ro Khanna is I see a very calculated, very smart branding exercise for the Democratic Party to appeal to left-leaning young voters. And I think that they know exactly what they're doing. And I think that, I mean, just remember how it was perceived with Elizabeth Warren, right? I mean, you brought up a lot of really good points. One of them is Elizabeth Warren received the same treatment every single time she tried to play ball with the Democrats. You know, if she genuinely believed that she could be the 2020 presidential nominee from having been so cooperative with the Clinton campaign up until that point, she was in for a very harsh surprise. I don't necessarily think she genuinely believed it. I think it was prearranged for her to join that primary in order to siphon support from the more PMC progressives to split the Sanders vote and help stop him from getting the nomination. But if she genuinely thought, hey, they're going to like me now because I've been so nice to them, she found this out the hard way too. Revolutionary Blackout just did a live stream yesterday or today, and they were talking about how civility politics is a tool of the ruling class, right? Just like what you were talking about, Kshama Sawant. I could not be a bigger fan of Kshama Sawant. And anybody who has not listened to her interviews with Chris Hedges, either on his show, The Chris Hedges Report, or with Brianna on the Bad Faith podcast, really should. Because it's the saying, we'll give you what you want if you're just nicer about it, is a con job. It never happens. It's the constant, carrot being dangled out here. And then it's like, it reminds me so much of narcissistic abuse. Anybody that has ever had to deal with how pathological narcissists operate in their cycle of manipulation, the Democratic Party and the liberal class operates in the exact same way, and it is always, here's the carrot, here's the thing that you want that I'm not going to give you, and then I'm going to provoke you into a fight, right? And then when you respond proportionally with a valid reaction to what I provoked you into, now I'm going to project the blame onto you and say, well, I would have given you everything you were asking for, except then you had to go and do that. And it's like lather, rinse, and repeat. Civility politics is bullshit.
That's all true. I've been reading, and Keaton's absolutely right. I'm somebody who was out there volunteering for AOC when it was a lost cause. It was just one of those lost causes worth fighting for. So I was ecstatic when she got elected, and I became very quickly less ecstatic enough that I never did another thing for her afterwards. But when I see her interviews, like this interview is a good example, I don't see malevolence. I see a kid who got thrust into the spotlight and is not quite sure how to manage her position under circumstances where she's dealing with this completely corrupt, nominally left party that's really a right party, which she has said publicly that this is a right-wing party. And I think she's decided to try to play an inside game. The article makes a point of saying that a lot of the framing around climate change now is owed to her. And there's probably some truth to that. And I think she is looking at examples like that and saying, well, I am accomplishing more here than I would on the streets, which is a dubious proposition. But I think that's where she's coming from. I don't think she's coming from a insincere place. I really don't. Look, the woke language is annoying. I think it ill serves her. It only appeals to people who are already with her, all the stuff about her lived experience and carving out space and all that fucking bullshit. She's a product of her generation. That's how she speaks. But overall, I think she's a young woman struggling with a very difficult moral conundrum. How do you stay inside this unmovable, corrupt machine and do some good? I think she really is trying. And hey, look, the point that her influence probably does have a lot to do with the way they're framing climate issues and such now. Yeah, that's valid. I've said for a long time, given a long enough time horizon, yeah, time is on the side of the progressives. We just don't have that time horizon. We don't have it. Yes, do I think given 10 to 15 years, the AOCs would be the mainstream of American politics? Yeah, I think by that time it's too late. And I think we have such a corrupt system that we're more likely to fall into fascism before we could ever get to a place where you'd have this progressive revolution.
Please clap.